So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the school year 2022-23 coordinating entity out of school time competition grant information session. My name is Deborah Eichenbaum. I'm a grants management specialist with the OST office. I'm gonna let Alex Brown introduce himself.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I'm Alex Brown, Communications and Outreach Specialist with the OST office. And then before I pass it back to Deborah, I do want to frame the conversation because this is my job and one of my titles. I'm in charge of outreach and marketing and communications here. And so one of the things, a lot of the times that we often refer to ourselves as Learn 24. And the reason that we do that is that as our public facing name, because we are the Office of Out of School Time Grants and Youth Outcomes located in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education. And so that is a tongue twister and a lot to say each and every time. So when we're out in the public, we do say Learn 24, and that is incumbent of the entire network, that is including providers, organizers, and nonprofit organizations that are providing service to young people right here in the district. And so you too are a part of that Learn 24 network. But if you do see Learn 24, or you do see the OST office, or you do see the Office of Out of School Time Grants and Youth Outcomes, please note that those names are interchangeable. Sometimes people don't say that they know who Learn 24 is, or they don't know who the OST office is. So I just wanted to make that announcement before we get started.
Thanks, Alex. So this is the school year 22-23 coordinating entity OST RFA grant information session. If you're here for a different grant information session other than for the coordinating entity role, then those were held earlier this week. You can ask questions at any time at the email address provided in the RFAs, and the information session PowerPoint slides should be available, I believe, already on the Learn 24 website, or they will be available soon on the Learn 24 website. And the funding for the school year 22-23 coordinating entity RFA is made available through the OST office. Federal funds have also been made available by OSSI. Grant awards are always contingent upon the availability of funds. This RFA is offered in partnership with the District of Columbia Department of Human Services, known as DHS, or the District of Columbia Housing Authority, DCHA. It depends on which site and for which group of youth the coordinating entity would be offering programs for. The intent of the request for application, the purpose of this grant competition is to provide high quality after school programs for youth ages 5 to 17 that reside at a DCHA or a DHS community. Those communities have typically been underserved in the past. This is also the purpose of this competition is also to engage community-based vendors to provide programming through subcontracts. The coordinating entity will be responsible for organizing the subcontracts. The school year 22-23 coordinating entity RFA invites high-performing, fiscally responsible, nonprofit youth development organizations with a history of success in increasing participants' academic knowledge, skills, and behavior, and serves youth ages 5 to 17 with programs that meet after school. The organizations applying must have experience managing after-school programs or youth programming, experience managing subcontractors or a willingness to work with subcontractors, and an ability to implement evidence-based practices that support youth development. So continuation cycles. Everyone's always interested in continuation funding. The OST office has 2 grant cycles per year. There's the school year grant cycle, which is what this one is, and it usually comes out in April or May, and the summer, which usually comes out around October. Only school year grants are eligible for continuation funds as the cycle between summer programs is too long. All OST school year grants are eligible for 2 additional years of funding, assuming that there's good standing and the availability of funds. After that 3rd year of funding, organizations must reapply in the open competition. If an organization is funded in the same fiscal year in both the school year and the summer competition, they are then invited to a year-round competition, and if awarded, would need to provide school year and summer programs for each year of the continued funding. If an organization becomes a year-round grantee, they will need to apply for both the school year and summer application after their 3rd year of funding. So same cycle, you apply, you have 2 years of funding, whether it's through that invitation only or just the school year. You get those 2 additional years of continuation funding, assuming good standing and the availability of funds. And then at the end of that, you would reapply. If you were a year-round grantee, meaning you had previously been invited to that year-round competition, in that year that you end your funding, you would need to apply for both the school year and the summer competition. Total amount of funding. The OST office anticipates awarding a total of $500,000 in this grant competition and up to $115,000 per grantee. I already said grant funds could be federal or local, and the OST office does maintain the right to adjust the number of grant awards and award amounts, and grant awards are contingent on the availability of funding, which I believe I've now said 4 times. Youth development outcomes. The intent of this grant is to support high-quality OST programs that offer educational, social, emotional, and physical health opportunities for youth. The OST office is seeking to fund youth-serving organizations that provide intentional opportunities that help youth reach developmental outcomes and have meaningful roles in their community. We define youth development outcomes as the results of programs, services, and supports that are designed to engage youth to meet their developmental needs and refer to changes in knowledge, attitude, or behavior. These outcomes have been framed into 2 different categories, both identity and ability. Identity is a sense of personal well-being and connection and commitment to others, whereas ability is knowledge, skills, and attitudes that prepare youth for adulthood. Outcomes are generally knowledge, skills, attributes, abilities, and behaviors youth need to be healthy, caring, and responsible as they transition into adulthood. So the target population for this grant is, first of all organizations do need to serve school-age youth, ages 5 and above. Applicants must serve youth who reside in DHS or DCHA communities and explain their relationship to the identified community. The OST office, with the assistance of DCHA and DHS, will contact applicants regarding site locations and may request a change of site location. Applicants who have experience delivering services at public housing or temporary housing communities may receive additional points. For DCHA locations, youth from surrounding neighborhoods are eligible to participate as long as they are district residents. And unless, of course, DCHA has said that that would not be appropriate, depending on the community. DHS programs must be offered off-site and transition transportation must be discussed in the application. It's Friday, so my words are definitely getting tangled up today. The grant and the program period. So for this school year grant, they are the same. It's October 1st through June 30th, but they refer to different things. The grant period refers to the time period that an organization can submit bills or receipts for goods or services to the grant manager against the grant funds. So, for example, if rent is part of the budget, September rent is not an acceptable grant cost. Whereas the program period refers to the time period in which the program must be held. And obviously the program must be held within the school year parameters, which because our grants cannot start before the fiscal year, that would be October 1st, and the program would have to end by June 30th. Program dosage. Programs must offer combined services covering a minimum of 8 hours per week for a minimum of 24 weeks during the school year period to the same group of youth. Priority points may be awarded for applications that exceed the minimum dosage expectation. So 8 hours per week could be 4 days a week, 2 hours a day after school. You may choose to have your program open 3 hours a day after school for 4 days a week, or whatever combination. Maybe you want to have your program open 5 days a week for 2 hours, or whatever it might be. But the minimum would be 8 hours per week, which would typically be 2 hours a day after school, 4 days a week. Grantees and subcontractors may not charge a fee to any district youth attending the program. And organizations must offer consistent and ongoing program designed to enroll the same group of youth at the proposed sites. That doesn't mean that you cannot continue to enroll youth throughout the school year. You definitely can. It just means that you can't do, for example, 4 different programs for 6 weeks each, and then have the same program in the next 6 weeks. And so you cycle the first 6 weeks, you have 10 kids, and then those 10 kids are gone. You use different 10 kids. That's not what these programs are designed for. They're designed to be open to the same group of youth throughout the school year. Program location. Locations will be determined based on DHS and DCHA need for programming in the area. If awarded, grantees will discuss with DHS and/or DCHA the potential locations that services will be provided. Applicants should definitely propose the sites that they want to program at, and organizations may apply to serve youth at one or multiple sites, and OST programs may be offered at any location, either inside or outside of the district, as long as it is for district youth. I often cite the example that we have a program that does school year and summer programming, and in the summer they bring their youth to Wyoming. They are district youth, however, but their program occurs in Wyoming. And please list the proposed sites on the cover sheet. All right, look at us. 219, we've already gotten through one section. So let's keep going. We are now at eligibility and requirements, organizational requirements. Organizations must be 501c3s and operating for a minimum of 2 years. Fiscal sponsors are not eligible to apply, and organizations must be registered to operate in the District of Columbia, and organizational indirect costs should not exceed 30% of the total organizational budget. This is not the program budget indirect costs, which I will explain in a bit. Operations. This here says fiscal sponsors, and I believe that is incorrect. I will double check, but I believe that fiscal sponsors are not eligible to apply for this grant. However, moving on, organizations do need to provide the 990s forms and for the last 2 years of filing, as well as clean hands, good standing, and a basic business license. I will talk about the dates for that in just a little bit. And if an applicant is a prior or current Learn24 grantee, the applicant must be in compliance with all prior grant agreements. Organizations must have offered the program for at least 2 years. A one-page logic model or theory of change is required. There is a pre-recorded logic model workshop that can be found on the Learn24 website. And the logic model will not count toward narrative page limits. However, it will be used in part to score the rubric. And I see Alex just put that in the chat. Thank you so much. So we have a template also for logic models. It is not required to use the template. It is just there for your convenience. The district is seeking coordinating entities that will subcontract with grassroots and community-led entities to provide a rich variety of experiences for youth. Financial requirements. So I already said the 990s and any schedule filed, the board approved organization budget, and the RFA states that should be current fiscal year income statement and profit loss statements. That is an error. It should state current fiscal year balance sheets and income statement or profit loss statement, since an income statement and a profit loss statement is basically the same thing. So apologies, it should say balance sheet and income statement. So audits. Organizations may not receive more than $50,000 in any fiscal year without providing a clean audit. Organizations with revenues over $250,000 must submit an audit conducted within the last 2 years. Organizations with revenues of less than $250,000 may submit an audit or a financial review or a letter of engagement. Any organization can submit a letter of engagement. However, grant agreements will not be signed unless an actual audit is in place for more, grant agreements will not be signed for more than $50,000 unless an actual audit is in place, not simply a letter of engagement. There is a full list of grant fund limitations provided in the RFA. The limitations do include sales tax. All grantees are nonprofit organizations and as such are exempt from paying sales tax. The OST office will not reimburse sales tax if it is on a receipt. Grant funds may only be used to support youth residing in the district. Grant funds may not be used in conjunction with other District of Columbia grant government funds to serve the same program and the same youth. Organizations can use a federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, or also known as a NICRA, and that rate may be applied to the budget. If a grantee does not have a NICRA, the de minimis indirect rate is 10%. That is for the budget, for the program budget. The minimum of 30% of the grant amount must be used for a minimum of 3 subcontractors per site to provide services directly to the youth. The use of subcontractors must be provided in the budget narrative. Program expenses. Grant funds must be applied to direct program costs, obviously with the exception of the indirect rates. These include program staff salaries and benefits, supplies and materials, contracted services, curricula, program evaluation, staff time related to data entry, training, reporting, accounting costs, and even PPE. Administrative expenses that relate to programming, such as rent for program space, are allowable. Rent for organizational headquarters would be an indirect cost. Indirect costs are allowable at that NICRA or de minimis rates, and the program budget must be provided in the Excel Learn24 budget template that is provided. There will be a training provided for any organization experiencing challenges with the template. This is only for program budgets and not the organizational budget. The organizational budget can be submitted in any format. Since this is a change from the previous applications, we would like you to make yourselves familiar with that budget template and please come to that training. That's why we're having it, because it is something new. There is a Google Sheet provided in the RFA. That Google Sheet is for example purposes only. It cannot be edited or downloaded. However, I believe Alex has just put it in the chat. There is also, if you don't download it from here, it is on the Learn24 website. The Learn24 budget template is available there. Okay, application narrative, another section down. We're flying today, people. The application process. We provide a checklist for your convenience. Do not submit or upload that checklist. However, it must be submitted online and in the Seamless Docs. When you first open Seamless Docs, after you've created your account, and I'll go into all of that in a little bit, you will see the checklist. I'm sorry, not the checklist. You will see the cover sheet, and that will be the first thing that you'll fill out. The checklist is just for your convenience. It is important to read the RFA very carefully. Please do not just read the questions for the narrative. All required documents must be submitted as either PDF, Microsoft Word, or Microsoft Excel files and be uploaded with the completion of the application form. Applications will not be reviewed if the process is not followed. Additional documents not requested will not be reviewed, and documents that exceed the page limits will not be reviewed. The narrative format. Responses should be written according to the sections and in the order listed in order to receive maximum point allocations. Organizing the narrative by sections with the corresponding header is suggested. That's exactly what we also tell grant reviewers. The budget narrative is included in overall pages and should be used to clarify and justify the budget calculations. The budget calculations, or for example, what's going to be submitted in that Learn24 budget template must be a separate document, and that can be any length. Reviewers are told to read and score one section at a time. So basically they can read a section and score it, and then get up and go have dinner between sections, which means they might not remember what you wrote in your prior section. So make it clear in each section, even if you have to duplicate information from a previous section, so that reviewers can answer those rubric questions simply by what is written in that section. We ask that you put yourselves in the reviewer's shoes as you're writing your narrative. In fact, please join us and be a reviewer. We have several current RFAs that are open, and anyone with youth development background is eligible to apply to be a reviewer. No one, of course, would be able to review for a competition in which that organization has applied, and we always have conflict of interest forms that everyone must complete. But as I've stated, we have several competitions currently open and are always looking for qualified reviewers. So shameless plug for the OST office, and I'm not embarrassed about it in the slightest. So all of the details for the narrative are important. The 1-inch margins, the Times New Roman font, the page numbering. Please number each of your pages of your narrative consecutively. Single spacing, don't put anything in that we don't ask for. You can put in tables, graphs, or charts, but it will count toward your page limit. So required documents. As I said before, the basic business license, good standing, and clean hands are all required documents. The good standing and clean hands need to be submitted need to be dated within the last year. So we have chosen June 7th as the date, since that's the date that the applications are due. So the date range would be June 7th, 2021 through June 7th, 2022. Anytime in there, and the good standing and clean hands is valid. The basic business license simply needs to be currently valid. The 501c3s need to be valid for the last 2 years, need to be a minimum of 2 years old is what your 501c3 should be dated. Current fiscal year balance sheet and income statement. Again, the slide is wrong, but I will correct it. 1 year of the most recent audit, financial review, or that letter of engagement, as we discussed earlier, the 990s and the schedules, the cover sheet, and the program location. That does not get uploaded, but it gets submitted online and filled out online. The narrative, up to 10 pages maximum, and the budgets, the program budget in the Excel document, and the organizational budget in any format, and the certification and assurances document. Okay, moving on to the scoring rubric. So for this RFA, there are 5 sections that will be scored on a 100-point scale. It's organizational history and staff experience, subcontractors, details about the after-school program, making connections, and the budget. Please note that the logic model will be used in part to score the section on the details about the after-school program and the program budget on the budget section. About the scoring rubric. The rubric is attached to the RFA. Make yourself familiar with it. Review it, and remember that reviewers use the rubric to score the narrative. There are 4 sections in each row. 1 point would be unacceptable or did not respond. 2 points is acceptable. 3 points good. 4 points excellent. Boxes are listed under each point. To receive the score in that box, for that number, all boxes must be checked in that section. Applicants will receive the scores in which all boxes can be checked. Supportive evidence. Specific information and results based on evidence should be included in the application. The application is an opportunity to show the reviewer the effectiveness of the program. The strongest applications include details on how evidence is collected, the data itself, program changes that have been made based on the data, and information on how that affects the outcomes. So what is supportive evidence? It's the stories of your organization. Do you have board members that were once program participants? Do you have staff members that were once program participants? Did you experience a youth that made such tremendous strides based on your program? And what were those strides? Include that information as supportive evidence. Some criteria in the rubric ask for quantitative or qualitative evidence to be provided. Show the impact of your program in both the data and the stories. Provide program budgets. Remember that the calculations do not count toward the page limits, but include the descriptions and the justifications for those calculations in the budget narrative. And the budget narrative part does count toward the total page limits. Fully describe the use of the grant dollars in the budget narrative, which is, as I said, part of the overall narrative. For example, explain like the how a salary was derived. Don't just put a salary in there. Multiply the number of hours by the number of weeks by the dollar amount to show what that final salary would be for a staff member. If it's materials for youth in the budget, explain how the art supplies, for example, or the STEM products that you're purchasing by the number of youth to show the final amount. Again, don't just put the final amount in the column. The actual program budget is a separate document, and as I said, can be any length. Try not to make it too long because it's still being reviewed by reviewers, and we try and make it so that they can actually understand it. Workshop and training. As I said before, the budget template is a new requirement, so we have added a training for that. The OST will host a virtual training on how to use that budget template and provide an overview and answer questions related to that template. That's going to be next Wednesday from 2 to 3. The logic model, there's a pre-recorded workshop on how to create a program logic model, and that's on the Learn24 website. Questions and answers. So you all see the email address here, rfa.sy22-23@dc.gov. Please submit all questions to that email address. We will begin publishing answers by today, very hopefully, assuming that my boss can stop experiencing the internet challenges that I know she's been experiencing today, but we're going to do our very, very best. And thank you, Alex, for putting that in the chat. That, I will say it again at the end of this, but if you do nothing else today, enable that email address, because if after you submit your application, we may have questions for you. And if we do, the questions will be coming from that email address. If you don't receive the question or it goes straight into your spam filter and into your junk, there is nothing we can do about it. And if that happens and we cannot contact you and we can't get the information we need your application may end up being ineligible for review. So please, please, please enable that email address, rfa.sy22-23@dc.gov. That's also the email address that will be award notices and denials will be sent from that email address. So for questions and answers, once published, we will continue to accept questions through May 31st. The last day that answers will be published is Friday, June 3rd. The RFA has an error. I believe it says Friday, June 1st, but that is actually Friday, June 3rd. If an organization is a current grantee and is reapplying, please do not contact your grant manager with questions, but send them into the email address provided in the RFA. Okay, application submission. Applications and attachments must be submitted by 5 o'clock on Tuesday, June 7th. Applications received after the deadline will not be reviewed. Applications without a confirmation notification will not be reviewed. Incomplete applications are not accepted. We don't accept by fax or in person, and no extensions will be granted for any missing application components. Applications with missing attachments will be considered incomplete. And we will not accept anything after June 7th, 2022 at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We do ask that you print out the confirmation when it comes up on your browser. If you can't do that, take a screenshot of it. And if you aren't sure how to do that, just take a picture of it with your phone so we can see you've received the confirmation notice, and your hopefully your screenshot will show the date and time as well. Application submission continued. So RFAs are submitted through Seamless Documents. As I said, there is a list of attachments and a checklist in the application. If there is a date associated with that document, please make sure that the document the organization submits is within that date range. All RFAs are submitted through Seamless Docs. An account will need to be created if the organization doesn't already have one. Click the link in the RFA to access the correct application. We do have 4 open applications. Please make sure you are submitting to the correct application that you are applying to. If the link does not appear, then copy it from the RFA because it's also listed out there and paste it in to the browser. Attachments from that list, that checklist, attachments cannot be saved once they start being uploaded into the Seamless Docs, and have to be submitted at once, which is why we give you the checklist. So you can put them all on your desktop, for example, and then they're all there ready to go and you can submit them all at once. The cover sheet can be saved. We do ask that you answer all of the questions on the cover sheet. It is also in the RFA, the cover sheet, but that is not an uploadable document. It has to be completed online. We have it right there in the application so that you can prepare your answers for it. Once you're done, you can click the paperclip icon or the submit button to access the list of required attachments and then upload those documents. For the cover sheet, again, there you're going to see when you open up the cover sheet, some have a little red star next to it. So it makes it look like only those are required. Actually, all of the questions are required. The document just did not allow us to put little red stars in each one, but please answer all of the questions on the cover sheet. There is an issue with the calendar. And if we have time at the end, I'm going to have Alex share the screen and show you the Seamless docs, but I'm just going to tell you very quickly. It's going to ask you the dates of your program, the start date and the end date. And if you're doing it on a compressed screen, sometimes the date range will not work and you might have to expand your screen to a full screen so that you can plug in the proper dates. Okay, review process. The OST office will organize panels of 3 independent grant reviewers who have a background and knowledge of youth development and out-of-school time. Each application will be read by 3 reviewers, and in the event that the 3 reviewer scores differ by 10 points or more from the average, a 4th review will be completed, and the initial score with the greatest difference from the mean will be discarded. It's a lot of math in one sentence, but the 3 reviewer scores will be used to calculate the final score, and that is then used to rank the applications. Priority points may be provided to ensure equity across the district, and additional points will be awarded consistently and objectively. All reviewers are trained in the use of the rubric, and all reviewers are screened for conflicts of interest. The interview process. The top 3 ranking applicants per site will be invited for an interview. The interview panel includes key stakeholders that may include representatives from the Deputy Mayor for Education's office, DHS, DCHA, resident councils, parents, youth, and the OST office. The reviewer score and interview scores will be used to generate a final score. And yeah, as I said, priority points may be awarded to communities with fewer existing programs, and the district will make final award decisions based on the final score. All applicants will be notified by email about the status of the award by August 2022. Applicants will receive the reviewer score sheets by September. And as I said, please ensure that email address, rfa.sy22-23@dc.gov, is on your list of acceptable email addresses to make sure it does not get caught in a spam filter. All funding decisions are final and are not subject to review, appeal, or protest. Application tips. So please make sure the application follows the order as it's written in the RFA. That's exactly what we tell reviewers to score by section. Do not submit documents or materials that aren't requested. It takes up your time and hours unnecessarily. The budget narrative should be detailed, show your math, avoid general language. Be detailed and specific, really tell your story, especially regarding your program activities, your authentic connection to the community, very important in these coordinating entity applications, how you've used evaluation to improve your program, how you've incorporated youth voice in the program design, and how you're tapping other revenue streams for your programs. Make sure that someone can read the narrative and understand what youth will experience. What does it feel like to actually be in your program? I always suggest it is always best to, and definitely the most difficult thing to do, no question about it, always best to write the narrative as early as possible and then ask a friend, a board member, someone I suggest who is not intimately involved in your programming to read the application and give them the rubric and have them score the rubric. Tell them to be tough. They are not doing you any favors if they just give you all 4s and say, wow, that was great. I really enjoyed it. No, you want them to be really hard on you so that you can go back and improve those sections where they scored you a little lower. It is a really great tool, but of course, no question about it, one of the hardest things to do, of course, to write something before it's due. We all know that. Okay, grantee requirements. So if awarded, this slide shows a general list of grantee requirements. Since the OST office is accountable to taxpayers for our grant funds, we do have strict compliance measures. We also work very closely with our grantees to make sure they are able to comply. We try and ease the burden whenever possible. We believe in an open door policy. We're happy to talk or answer questions at any time with our grantees. And we always try to be responsive and available. Grantees will be required to attend grantee meetings and activities, including participate in the PQI with a self-assessment at a minimum. That is something that was suspended in the last year or two due to COVID. Participate in research and evaluation activities, comply with insurance requirements, participate in administrative and programmatic site visits, and provide any required documentation, ensure that all people working with youth receive the required clearances, utilize the district's database known as CitySpan, provide programmatic updates, financial documentation, and we do ask that there will be someone who is going to be a grant reviewer by the end of the continuation cycle. As I said, we have 2 grant cycles per year. So as a new requirement, someone from the organization will need to be a grant reviewer at least in one cycle over those 2.5 years at some point. And coordinate with DCHA or DHS regarding site-specific requirements. Feel free to review the important dates listed in the RFA, the date of the RFA release. Today is the grant information session. That's wrong on this slide, since I know it is not Wednesday, May 18th. The budget template, the last day that questions can be answered. Again, it was incorrect. It did state June 1st for the last day that answers will be published, but that's June 3rd, as I stated previously, and completed applications due June 7th. And if needed, then the OST office will reach out by that email address that I've provided sometime in the month of June, and in August,